Previously on Warcraft Rewritten. Nah, just kidding. I just always wanted to say that. Welcome back, Heroes of the Horde and Adventures of the Alliance. My name is Weirdo, and today we're here to answer a very important question. What is the point of World of Warcraft? Or, more specifically, what is the point of Warcraft's story? Why is it being told? Maybe that's too big a question to ask before lunch, so let's try this. What is it even about? Blizzard has said that at its core, Warcraft is a story of orcs versus humans. So that would make it about the war between the Alliance and the Horde, and how those two factions hate one another, right? The narrative does follow two clashing perspectives, and that actually influenced the MMO market for many years. But the nuance I've seen so many copycats and even players fail to realize is that WoW doesn't have an evil faction, but instead two factions composed of multiple heroic archetypes, and either is capable of eliciting empathy and respect from any perspective except from the opposing faction. That gives us a story about two separate groups of heroes fighting to save the same world, both with a unique brand of strength, neither without their own flaws, and each incapable of seeing things from the perspective of the other. Who do you root for in a story where the good guys are fighting the good guys? If this were a movie, you wouldn't root for either. You'd watch passively, while the narrative made them figure out how to get along, or alternatively determine who was more right than the other. But WoW is a game. As such, you're forced into a proactive participation role from the moment you make a character, and you're forced to choose a side. And your whole experience in-game is dependent on that choice. In the early years, you couldn't even have two characters from a different faction on the same server. WoW was red versus blue into its very bones, from the game to the forums to BlizzCon and even Blizzard themselves. And in rare cases where the story converged into one lane, they would still have different access points. In effect, though we're telling one single story, it has two omnipresent perspectives. It's as though it's being told from third and second person all at the same time. So I pose the question again. What is the point of that story? We're not going to answer it now, but keep it in mind as we pick up where we left off. Last time, the Ash Knights
and the Mage, Ronan,
had made their way to Stromgarde, and the Thunderslayers
and the Shadow Hunter, Rokon,
were down in Gadgetzan, while our, as of yet, separate Night Elf Priestess and Undead Assassin had been sent with the respective champions of their races to raid the halls of the Scarlet Monastery and the ruins of Dire Maul. Baron Paranold and Nathanos Blightcaller lead a series of covert raids into the monastery, starting the library and the armory, where the warrior Herod and the arcanist Doan both fall to the Baron's knife. To their surprise, the party finds that they are far from the only undead within the Scarlet Halls. They discover that the graveyard had fallen to the plague, and they are forced to put down Blood Mage Thalnos and his risen minions. Here, the madness of the Crusade is shown to persist even into death, as the cursed specter of the Headless Horseman rises and begins to rampage through the halls.
This is the same boss from the Hallow's End event, added here to megatize the dungeon.
Finally, the Baron and his allies come face to face with one of their greatest accusers in the monastery's chapel. The Scarlet Commander, Reynault Mograine, son of the legendary Ashbringer. The battle between the Crusader and the Assassin is fierce, but in the end, the Zealot falls, only to rise again in the light, thanks to the arrival of High Inquisitor Whitemane.
All hail Sally Thymane! Whitemane.
The mad pair scream damnation upon the Forsaken, but in the end, they too are silenced in death. After the battle, the risen corpse of one of the Scarlet Crusade's founders, High Inquisitor Fairbanks, is discovered in a secret concealed chamber by Blightcaller, and his mindless ghoul is taken back to the Undercity to see what can be learned.
Alright guys, time to dust off the meanwhile counter.
Meanwhile, Theta Saberfang and Chandra's Feathermoon trace numerous trails of corruption to the ruins of Eldrith Alas, claimed by the Gorduni Ogres, a group of satyrs still devoted to the Burning Legion and, to their surprise, a secret society of Kaldorei Highborn. In the east of the ruins, the party battles the satyrs and their foul machinations, taking on Aizen, the Wild Shaper. In the satyrs' madness, he calls forth the fallen wild god Omen, once a champion of the wilds, now tainted by Fel's corruption, and a touch of something much darker.
This is the boss from the Lunar New Year event, added here to mirror the Headless Horseman.
In the western ruins, the party meets Prince Tortheldrin, a highborn magister who's founded a secret society of Kaldorei sorcerers, calling themselves the Shen-Relar, after arcane magic was outlawed following the War of the Ancients. He's initially friendly, if cold, but when the party discovers that he and his followers are siphoning Fel magic off of the demon Imolthar, he in turn attempts to assassinate the elves in order to silence them. For his efforts, the demon is destroyed and the fallen prince is slain. At last, the priestess and the general launch their assault on the Gorduni Ogres in the north of the city. The pair find King Gordok, driven entirely mad by the whispers of the Emerald Nightmare, whose corruption sits like a heavy smog over this corner of the city. After a fierce battle, the Ogre King is slain and his mind is finally allowed some peace. This corruption, so much deeper and more pervasive than that of the demons, troubles Chandris. But before they can consider any further, they are forced to leave, lest either of them be crowned the new king by the surviving ogres. And with that, the timelines have synchronized. The initial 6, now merged down to 4 storylines, are currently unencumbered. And so where do we go from here? Well, if there's one thing you can be sure of, it's that when the Horde and the Alliance have nothing better to do, they start to covet thy neighbor's oxen.
Wait a minute, hold up. You said the Night Elves and the Forsaken hadn't joined the Alliance in the Horde yet.
True. And I think it's time to finally deliver on the promise we made to show those moments. You see, the conflict between humans and orcs is never one that happens in a vacuum. It makes an impact on Azeroth herself, and her people are always caught up in its wake. As the story goes on, more and more are forced to choose their side. And this wasn't just expressed through the narrative, but even in the ways that we played the game. The tensions are high. We raided capital cities, zones like Stranglethorn Vale or the Barrens became hotbeds of ganking shenanigans, and the never-ending battle between South Shore and Terran Mill spawned grudges that carry on to this very day, even outside the game. Trust me. In vanilla, PvP took on a life of its own, and it went from being a kind of incidental nuance to a completely valid way to engage with World of Warcraft. So back in the day, Blizzard decided to embrace that, which is where we come to next, the Battlegrounds. Battlegrounds were Blizzard's answer to the cry for a more structured PvP experience. They were the first time we had an objective past, here's a stick, here's a sandbox, there's your enemy, hit him. Harkin, wait, no! Considering the state of Battlegrounds and retail today, those of you who started playing later in WoW's life might not understand our reverence, but those first three were truly iconic experiences, and they spawned organic stories, unique to each player. Like me and a bear hiding the Horde flag in one of the tiny tents on the Silverwing Cliff while we prayed someone got the Alliance flag back before we got found.
Yeah, or like an Alterac Valley match that lasted 3 real-world days.
I always knew I wanted to include Battlegrounds in the rewritten story, but I was unsure how to do it. My experiences are iconic to me, but they'll mean nothing to someone who isn't me. I also considered making them dungeons, but that really wouldn't be true to their legacy, and so I was stumped. Battlegrounds needed stories to be a part of this new, story-focused WoW, but I had no idea where to get them.
Hey, did you know that Varian Rin and Brol Baremantle canonically fought in the Battle for Warsong Gold in the comics?
Huh. Now there's an idea. The Warcraft comic books were the result of a partnership between Blizzard and, if you can believe it, DC Comics, and contained a series of action-packed, character-driven adventures that were initially so popular that they ended up irreversibly altering the course of Warcraft's story. Not counting the Warcraft manga, which was really Kalagos' big show, the comics begin by telling the story of Logosh, an amnesiac human enslaved by the Horde-centric underground gladiator ring called the Crimson Ring, and they ended by telling the story of Medan, the son of Garona, as he learns to become some kind of mage, shaman, paladin hybrid class. The twist in either of these stories,
spoilers incoming for a 20-something-year-old comic,
is that Logosh is actually King Varian Rin, split into two halves by Onyxia in an evil ritual, while Medan is revealed to be the son of not only Garona, but also the guardian Medivh, capable of wielding arcane, elemental, and holy magic simultaneously without effort. Now, the comics would continue in different stories like the Ashbringer, the Dark Riders, and Bloodsworn, but those were different hands and really different narratives altogether. These first two stories, though they shifted focus at the halfway point from Varian to Medan, they contained largely the same characters and themes. The first part of the comic, silly though it may have been with its telenovela-styled evil twin gimmick, was fully embraced by the community and showered with roses and praise. Varian's iconic design is fully derived from the comic strip, as was his Warrior King persona. Now, meanwhile, the second half was met with near universal revulsion and showered with poo and hatred. It's a bit of a shame, really, since this was the story that brought Garona, Cho'Gall, and Egwene back into the spotlight, and also gave us the idea of founding a new Council of Tirisfal that brought together all magical disciplines instead of just the mages and the arcane. But, unfortunately, to get there, we had to put up with Medan, an earnest but obnoxious tri-breed of human, orc, and Draenei who was seamlessly good at everything, never made any mistakes, and multi-class like everyone's least favorite min-maxing that guy at a D&D table. He was even a child of Prophecy Chosen One, just to top it all off. The community backlash was so harsh that Blizzard effectively retconned him out of existence, which I don't think they've ever done before or since. They've denied doing this on paper, claiming he's still canon, but all references to him are entirely removed, and they even make a joke in Chronicles Glossary, claiming he was on page 404, and frankly, I'm inclined to follow their lead. The story of the back half of WoW's comics is compelling enough to survive without Medan, and we could easily credit enough of his feats to those around him, like his mother or...
Wait. Come on, man. That feels like a cop-out. This is Warcraft rewritten. There's gotta be a way to make the story work without surgically removing the poor kid.
No, he sucks. Grab your torches and pitchforks, let's go.
Okay, but why does he suck?
Well, he's a Mary Sue. That means he's inherently good at everything, lacks any depth or major character flaws, and the rules of the universe don't apply to him, and other characters are forced to act like dumber or lesser versions of themselves whenever he's around in order to make him even more perfect by comparison. Effectively, he's too perfect of a character, and his existence requires that all other characters become lesser to excuse his own implausibility.
Then why don't we just make him bad at everything? Alright, if the problem is that he's effortlessly good at everything, and other characters have to be weaker so that he can shine, well, Why not change him so that he's complete trash at everything? Like, he's unique because he can tap into all these different magical forces. But all those powers clash within him, like magical ADD, and he just ends up being bad at everything he tries.
Then what would be the point of him?
Well, the new council would need a conduit who can handle all the different magical flows. But his story could also be about trying to find his place. He fails at everything he tries his hand at, but he keeps trying. There's got to be something out there that he's meant to do. He just has to find it.
Shit. Did you just make me like Medan? Okay, bet. Let's go with that. Of course, it's not actually that easy. A few parts of the timeline are going to have to be shuffled a bit, and we'll be moving up certain portions of the back half of the comics to run parallel with the first. Varian's story naturally aligns to the Alliance, so I think this version of Medan will feel himself pulled more towards the Horde. Also, Medivh definitely cannot be his father in our timeline since we made Garona his daughter. He can still keep that familial connection to the Guardian, but as a grandson and not as a weird incest baby. That also means we need to decide who his father will be, but that's going to be a story for another day. Right now, the more pressing story is that of his foster father. One of the best things about the comic was its incredible cast of supporting characters. While Varian was enslaved as a gladiator, he actually had two teammates. Brawl Baremantle, a grouchy night elf druid with some serious anger issues, and Valera Sanguinar, a sassy blood elf rogue who ends up with a demonic addiction problem. The pair fought beside Varian during his enslavement, and they actually ended up champions of the Crimson Ring. Meanwhile, Medan's most present companion was Meryl Winterstorm, a 1,300-year-old undead mage who predates the Forsaken, even the Scourge, dating all the way back to the Arathi Empire. There was also Thargus Anvilmar, last of the old dwarf royal bloodline, Rhaegar Earthfury, no relation, owner of Varian's gladiator team, Vindicator Murad, the Draenei paladin, who would get more prominent in later expansions, and even Zabra Hex, a troll from Ashbringer, who uniquely chose to follow the Holy Light, after discovering, for lack of a better word, enlightenment within one of the holy temples. Something I found really cool about all of the characters I just listed is that they all originate from a line of Warcraft action figures, similarly developed by DC. Their names and designs were created first for merchandising purposes, and their backgrounds and personalities were developed after when they were put into the comics. DC ended up making 8 series of figures for this line, though the comics only drew on characters from the first 2. There's even 2 left over from the second series, Archelian Shadowheart and Sprocket Gyrospring. Look at that dude. That gnome is holding the friggin' Ashbringer.
Pretty sure that human has the Sword of a Thousand Truths, too.
I have no plans for these 2 right now, but if I ever need 2 extra hands, I'm coming here first. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. Where was I? Right, Battlegrounds. So that gives us our script and our cast, but we need to get back to the stages. Now, the big 3 Battlegrounds are, of course, Warsong Gulch, Arathi Basin, and Alterac Valley. But did you know there was actually meant to be a 4th? Ashara Crater, located in northern Kalimdor, is something of a legend in the dev community. Nobody's entirely sure what the Battleground is meant to be, some sources claiming it was going to be a second Alterac Valley boss rush, while others were convinced it had a strong MOBA influence. All anyone knows for certain is that its development was cursed. It went unfinished in Classic, and then got pushed to BC, then Wrath, and on, and there's even references made to its development all the way up to the Mists of Pandaria before it was finally shelved for good. It never found its moment, and so here we are. Looking at the files in-game, there appears to be a Night Elf settlement and a Tauren encampment, 2 giant dragon statues in the middle, and somewhere in between, an unusual underground ruin. In the comics, Varian, then called Logosh, and his teammates, Burl and Valera, fight a championship match for the Crimson Ring in Dire Maul, and are then transported to Thunderbluff. What if instead of Dire Maul, the championship match was held in those subterranean ruins? Canonically, the trio win their championship only for Valera to then be sold by Rhaegar to the owner of an all-female gladiator team, thus separating the trio. It's not long after that Burl and Varian escape, and Rhaegar sort of allows them to go, after realizing his heart is no longer in the business of owning slaves. In that story, the gift of a hippogriff feather allows Brawl to summon a getaway bird, but what if the championship actually took place in the underground ruins of Ashara Crater, the ritual with the elemental also taking place somewhere in the valley, while Valera is getting sold, and the 2 are then only able to escape due to the chaos caused by the sudden battle between the Night Elves and the Tauren.
Slow down. Let's talk shop. You can't have a vanilla battleground without battle masters.
True enough. We're in need of faces for this conflict, drawing from real-world quests. On the Horde side, the Stonespire tribe had been forced from their sacred motherland in the southern barrens by the Quillbore, the Centaurs, and, oddly enough, the dwarves of Baal Medan. Harassed all the way across the barrens, the tribe seeks refuge in the lands of Ashara, but are unfortunately met with hostility from the local Kaldori, a group of hippogriff riders known as the Star Talon Watch, named after General Star Talon, posted to a isolated outpost. The Night Elves, for their part, are aware that the Tauren have now thrown in their lot with the Horde, and that the Horde have been expanding their lumber operations. The 2 forces are led by Gan Stonespire, the only Tauren I could think of violent enough to spark this conflict, and Commander Gerodnus, a flight master turned hardened paranoid battle commander through a series of internet memes. Ultimately, it's a breakdown of communication between the two commanders that ignites the clash. Gan, overtired and desperate to save what few members of his clan remain, and Gerodnus, overly paranoid after years of isolation and assassination attempts, come to blows in a duel, and then in a skirmish, and finally in an all-out battle. The Warhawks and the Horde soon join in, seeing this as an opportunity to gain more fertile grounds for Durotar, while the Kaldorei push back, determined to lose no more ground to Orcish aggression, or, tragically, their new bovine allies. As the battle escalates, more forces are drawn in on both sides. Fresh from the return from Gadgetzan, the Thunderslayers are sent by Thrall into Ashara Crater to aid the Stonespire tribe, while Theta Saberfang, shortly after her return from Dire Maul, is sent to do the same for the Star Talon. Max and Theta even come to blows in one of the nastier skirmishes of the battle. Below the battlefield, before the fighting breaks out, the Crimson Ring hold their championship bout. Logosh, Brol, and Valera emerge victorious as champions, but Valera is sold shortly after, while Logosh and Brol are off on a vision quest with some of the Tauren Shaman. Several days after the sale, Ashara Crater becomes a battlefield, and Logosh and Brol take advantage of the chaos to escape. The two join the fighting on the side of the Star Talon, while Rhaegar reluctantly takes up with the Stonespire. The battle rages for several days, with no clear victor on either side, but eventually, the Night Elves begin to lose ground, and it becomes clear that they can no longer continue to stand alone.
That covers half of the comic book characters and half of our characters. What's next?
I'm glad you asked. Naturally, we couldn't just add in a single battleground. That would have thrown off the eventual symmetry. And I knew from the get-go that I wanted to include Ashara Crater, but as all other cut or unfinished battlegrounds were more vague ideas than actual concepts, I struggled to find a proper parallel. Until I started, despite my therapist's wishes, looking at older concept maps again, and found that a significant location appeared on every map right up to the Alpha, the Isle of Tol Barad.
The World BG? From Kata?
The very same. From the earliest draft of WoW's alpha maps, it seems that the Isle was always meant to be present before it became one of the first victims of Blizzard's subliminal island hatred, and it fits nicely here for a number of reasons. Chiefly, the island contains a citadel built during the era of the Arathi Empire, which in modern times is used as a magical prison to house demons. And, wouldn't you know it, we just happen to have a character who was a part of the Arathi Empire and a powerful mage whose story heavily involves demons. On top of all that, the southern coast of Tol Barad is said to be a hotbed of pirate activity. And do you all remember who we went and made a pirate in our version of the story?
I was wondering when that was going to come up.
In the comics, Corona just knows Meryl, with not even the smallest explanation for how or when or where they would have met, or what he did to earn such implicit trust that she was willing to delegate the raising of her child to him. Meryl, the millennia-old corpse, proceeds to raise Medan as his own son in the shadowy forests of Duskwood, which is spooky and cool, but also is never utilized to add anything to the story. So the two will now live on the Isle of Tol Barad, in one of the abandoned, ruined towers of the Citadel, where Meryl mentors Medan in arcane magics, while at the same time maintains a watchful eye on the arcane wards that trap the Hold's demonic prisoners. The pair also routinely receive visitors on the Isle, chiefly Garona Halforkin. Instead of her hiding out in silhouettes and tree branches for a decade, she keeps regular contact, though I think she would conceal the fact that Medan is her son. They're also regularly visited by Zabra Hex, the curiosity of a troll who has embraced worship of the Holy Light. This character never actually appeared in the OG comics, but does so later on in the Ashbringer comic, as I kind of mentioned. We added him here to balance out the Horde and Alliance numbers, but also because he's weird, and I like him. And finally, as a natural midpoint between the kingdoms of Stromgarde, Khazmodan, and Kul Tiras, the island is often received by ambassadors, including one Thargus Anvilmar, who many years ago happened upon Medan and Meryl, and after taking a liking to the lad, offered to train him in martial combat, though privately remarking to Meryl that the young mutt has never found much luck with any one weapon in particular. In the modern day, just as the battle for Ashara Crater kicks off, the Forsaken arrive on the shores of Tol Barad, in hopes of opening negotiations with the cosmopolitan representatives of the island. A force of Forsaken known as the Shadowstalkers, a sect of the Dreadstalkers loyal to Varimathras, arrive on the island led by the twin Abomination lieutenants, Grummus and Merp. They are greeted with hostility, but no outright violence, until a number of the Shadowstalkers attempt to infiltrate the demonic prison. Baradin's Wardens, a symbolic coalition force charged with guarding the Citadel, led by Commander Marcus Johnson,
not to be confused with General Marcus Jonathan,
meet the Shadowstalkers in battle as they attempt to wrest control of the Citadel. A few days into the battle, the Ash Knights, sent by Shaw, enter the fray to assist Johnson, and Jordan crosses blades for the first time with Baron Paranold, as he too joins the battle and the two armies clash for control of the Cursed Island. In the heat of battle, several of the Wardens confuse Meryl for a member of the Forsaken and attack. He and Medan are forced to defend themselves and ultimately join the battle on the side of the undead. They encounter Thargus during the retreat, who covers for them and allows them to flee, with Zabra helping the duo evade capture, leading them to the southern port, before mysteriously vanishing, as is his custom. Medan, Meryl, and some of the retreating Forsaken, including our dear Baron, are rescued by the arrival of Garona and the Stormreaver pirates. In the days following the battle, Sylvanas realizes that the conflict will have made the Alliance view them as little better than the Scourge. With the silence from Kolthala chaos, threat of the Scourge and the Scarlets, and now the hostility from the Alliance. She knows that if the Forsaken are to find any hope for survival, they must find allies, a fact she makes clear while she berates Varimathras publicly. This pair of twin revelations had by the leadership of the Night Elves and the Forsaken triggers the next two mirrored legendary quest lines, the Theramore Summit and the Booty Bay Parley. High Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind, while still holding a deep respect for Thrall, is unsure of how to share her ancient homeland with his new horde, and so reaches out to Jaina Proudmoore, and the two arrange for a formal meeting to take place at the Lady Enchantress's home of Theramore Isle. Meanwhile, Garona Half-Orcan, after having aided several Forsaken during the Battle of Tol Barad, offers to parlay a meeting between the Orcs and the Forsaken at a suitably neutral location, the pirate port of Booty Bay. The stars of these two shows will very much be Jaina and Garona, serving as the more formal introduction of both crucial characters. Jaina, naturally as a member of the Alliance and their de facto leader in the West, has no trouble orchestrating the summit at Theramore, and Theda is invited to accompany Tyrande as part of her procession. Garona, for her part, while not actually a member of the Horde, as a veteran of the First War, holds a measure of respect, if not exactly trust, with the Horde's old guard. Sylvanas herself sails to the pirate port, accompanied by the Baron and a number of other key vassals, but their efforts require far more negotiation and goblin bribery to make the parley take place. The shamanistic Horde are, of course, resistant to the thought of an alliance with the undead Forsaken. However, and this is according to actual canon, it is the druid Hamul Runtotem who ultimately convinces the Horde leadership to give them a chance. And so, the Horde and the Alliance send processions of their own to their opposing continents, which causes a temporary parting of ways for our two guilds. Dexter Dazzlespring elects to voyage across the sea to Theramore alongside Thargus Anvilmar to reunite with Lady Proudmoore, an old classmate of his, while Jorn elects to remain in the Eastern Kingdoms to help defend Stormwind from the continued threat of the Defias and the Syndicate. The journey to Theramore runs smoothly, almost suspiciously so, and for the first day, the summit goes off without a hitch. Dexter meets the priestess Theda, and the two find that they are in easy company with one another. However, on the second day, Theramore Isle is suddenly attacked by a force of Naga. The Alliance and the Night Elves once more take up blades together, and the new alliance is tempered in the blood of the serpents. Theda and Dexter are sent after the retreating Naga, which leads them to Alkaz Island, where the two slay the Naga's leader, Morgalla Darksquall, and discover a secret hidden within the belly of the island, Stormwind's missing king, Varian Wrynn. But meanwhile, Kel Stonebull is called upon to journey with his former master, Hamul, and Rhaegar Earthfury to Booty Bay to meet with Sylvanas, while Magus remains to help the Horde root out the remnants of the Shadow Council. Garona offers tacit assistance, but the bulk of the mediation is taken on by the Tauren, who try to temper the Horde's interrogation of Sylvanas and her party. However, on the first night between negotiations, the Bloodsail Buccaneers,
the second hate faction from Vanilla we all forgot about,
poison and kidnap a number of citizens from Booty Bay, including several members of the Forsaken and Horde delegation. The prisoners are then unceremoniously dropped in the pits of Gurabashi Arena, where Short John Mithril, leader of the Bloodsail Buccaneers, announces a free-for-all bloodbath with a prize for the last man standing. Here, Kel and the Baron actually engage in a short battle, each gaining the respect of the other, before Rhaegar, well aware of the irony, puts a stop to all the chaos and aids the party in slaying the goblin pirate captain. The delegates return to Booty Bay, and Garona and Sylvanas, who both avoided capture, are surprised to find the Orcs, the Trolls, and the Tauren all cheering the Forsaken skill in battle. Meanwhile, I figured during all this time, Jorn and Magus would have been engaging in their own low-stakes shenanigans in the capital city. Thinking about it now, maybe Children's Week might be the best excuse for the two to be kept busy. It would also make for two cute side stories, and could even introduce characters like Anduin Wrynn and Bane Bloodhoof properly as sponsors for the orphanages. Neither are big players at this stage in the game, but they will be one day, and it'd be nice to start seeding their stories in even this small fashion.
On top of that, when the questline comes to an end and it's time to buy the orphans a parting gift, they could end up having to rely on our craftsmen.
Oh, I like that. Bandus Forgefire, the dwarven blacksmith and engineer, could forge a tiny tin soldier for Jorn's young squire, while Shakazan, the troll alchemist and enchantress, could sew together a magical doll for Magus's ward. Anyway, back to the action. Meanwhile, the Naga attack, having unintentionally resulted in the rescue of King Varian, or at least half of him, solidifies the pact between the Alliance and the Kaldori. They are formally welcomed by King Varian into the Alliance, while the Horde, having witnessed the tenacity of the Forsaken in the Gurabashi Arena Bloodsail Buccaneer bloodbath, are invited back to Orgrimmar, where they might formally join the Horde. However, the rising tensions allow for little time to celebrate new alliances. Before the champagne bottles can even be popped, two new battles erupt on either continent. In Ashenvale, the Warsong clan have erected a lumber mill, and are felling the ancient sacred trees long protected by the Kaldori. The Silverwing Sentinels, led by Saura Swiftarrow, clash with the Warsong Outriders, themselves led by Gargok, as the two engage in the first ever armed debate between cat and dog people. In the spirit of their new union, Dexter and Theda race to join the battle on the side of the Silverwings, while Magus once more takes up arms on the side of the Warsong. Additionally, as was pointed out by my fine associate, Logosh and Brol also join the battle on the side side of the Alliance's new union, and it's Dexter that first notices just how alarmingly similar Logosh looks to the recently freed King Varian. Meanwhile, a Forsaken force known as the Defilers, led by the infamous Black Bride, seek to drive the remaining human forces out of Lordaeron's subcontinent. They launch a surprise attack on Arathi Basin, forcing the League of Erethdor and their leader, Sir Maximus Adams,
the one who was replaced by Randolph Letter in Wrath for some reason,
onto the defensive. Baron Perinold, now accompanied by Kel Stonebull as well as Medan, who has, I think now, formally decided to join the Horde after the Gurabashi incident, and Merrill, who also joins to keep an eye on Medan, storm the basin and capture its numerous resources, while harried on all sides by Jorn Gavinrad, who has joined on the side of the League. As the dust settles on both continents, the leadership of the Horde and the Alliance begin to realize the potential consequences of their expansion. Though neither are willing to back down or to abandon their new allies, the top brass begin to eye their maps warily. Thrall and Jaina both privately realize that this will mean a new war between orcs and humans, while Sylvanas quietly muses on what her sisters might think of her siding with the very orcs who once destroyed their home. The momentary ceasefire also gives our guildies time to regroup and catch their breath.
And for some of the comic storylines to catch up, like the Idol of Remulus.
Dexter invites Theta to travel with him back to Stormwind, where he introduces her to Jorn, and Jorn likewise introduces the two to Bandus Forgefire. Both are invited to join the Ash Knights, and meanwhile, following a quick Zeppelin ride back to Orgrimmar, a similar offer is extended to the Baron and Shaka Zahn by the Thunderslayers. In almost parallel time, Bandus and Shaka accept, but make it clear that they are not fighters. Bandus having given up combat after the loss of his leg and his griffin during the Third War, and Shaka feeling that she's far too old to be running around in the muck and the heat. Theta and the Baron, on the other hand, express reservations. Following the events of the Scarlet Monastery and Dire Maul, the two have lingering, unfinished business regarding the Emerald Nightmare and the Scarlet Crusade, and would be unable to join their new allies while their quests remain outstanding. In response to their new friends declaring that they're unable to join their organizations, the Knights of the Lost Ashes and the Thunderlord Militia pledge that their organization will instead join their new friends. The Knights purchase a small house in Old Town and leave Bandus in charge of its renovations, before setting off for the Swamp of Sorrows. Theta explains that after encountering the sickening presence of the Emerald Nightmare during her fight against the Ogre King in Dire Maul, she has been receiving visions of an unholy temple sunken beneath a swamp in the east. After arriving in the area, the three companions are soon met by the mysterious Lord Itharius, appearing in the hilarious Vanilla High Elf model. He reveals himself to be the one behind Theta's visions, and subsequently a member of the Green Dragonflight. The story, as he tells it, is that Ysera, leader of all Green Dragons, once sundered the temple of Adal-Hakar when the heathen troll priests attempted to summon their dark blood god, Hakar the Soulflayer, into Azeroth. Unfortunately, the cult of the Adalai survived and continued to perform their dark rituals within the sunken temple, and thus Irenicus, consort of Ysera and brother of Itharius, was sent within the temple's depths to put an end to the Adalai, but he has not been heard from since. Theta, Jorn, and Dexter enter the temple, and with Itharius, they battle the Adalai priests, and the object of their worship, an avatar of Hakar, deep within the temple. But the deeper they dive, the more uneasy they feel. Even with the avatar dealt with, Itharius refuses to leave until he finds his brother, and so they press on until they find him in the deepest level of the temple, fully consumed by the Emerald Nightmare.
Man, that area of the dungeon is littered with Hargan skeletons.
Half present on the mortal plane and half phased within the dream, Itharius is unable to break through his brother's madness, and so the Alliance heroes are forced to put him down. Itharius laments that of all the Green Dragons, only Ysera had a stronger connection to the dream than his brother. If the Nightmare was able to truly claim Irenicus, he suspects that none of his brethren might be safe. Nevertheless, he thanks the three for their aid, and with her quest complete, Theta at last joins with Jorn and Dexter, becoming a full member of the Knights of the Lost Ashes. Meanwhile, the Baron reveals that the discovery of the undead Inquisitor Fairbanks has been pointing towards a dark secret at the core of the already insane Scarlet Crusade. The Slayers stake a claim to one of the dens in the Drag, leaving Shaka behind in charge of furnishings, before the Baron, Magus, and Kel hop back aboard one of the Goblin Zeppelins and ride across the sea to the Plaguelands. Though little of his mind remains, through interrogation, the Ghoul of Fairbanks makes continual references to the city of Stratholme and the dark secrets kept there. Famously the site of Prince Arthas's initial fall, after a perilous journey through the Plaguelands, the champions arrive to find the city in the midst of a martial tug-of-war between the Scarlets and the Scourge. After getting caught up in a skirmish between both sides, the trio are contacted by Lord Maxwell Tyrosus, leader of the Argent Dawn, an offshoot organization of the Knights of the Silver Hand, who cut ties with the Scarlets when the depth of their madness became unignorable. The Baron and the Slayers are surprised that the Paladin is willing to work with their kind, but Lord Tyrosus merely leads the trio to the last bastion of the light in the north, Light's Hope Chapel, where they find not only humans and paladins, but orcs, shamans, druids, and even several members of the Forsaken already among their ranks. The Paladin explains explains that the Argent Dawn care only for protecting Azeroth's people from the threat of the Scourge. To that end, all are welcome in their ranks. Beggars, after all, can't be choosers. The Baron himself is surprised to discover that he actually respects the Argent Dawn, and elects to join in their assault on Stratholme, accompanied by Magus and Kel. The trio eventually corner and bring down the Scourge commander within the city, Baron Rivendare.
Bet that Arthas wannabe didn't drop his sword either.
Before they are again contacted by Tyrosus, who requests their aid as he attempts to break through the ranks of the Scarlets and reach Sidon Dathrohan, leader of the Scarlet Crusade and one of the original 5 paladins of the Silver Hand. The party fights through hordes of insane lightbound zealots in order to reach Dathrohan and give Tyrosus his opening. The paladin implores the Grand Crusader to see reason and break from his mad obsession with purity, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. After a short battle between the two, the party is horrified to discover that Dathrohan has not only been dead for years, but that his body is being puppeted by the Dreadlord, Balnazar, once thought slain by Sylvanas and Veramathras. With the darkness of demon corruption now revealed to be at the heart of the Crusade, no quarter is given. One of the Scourge's most symbolic holdings in the Plaguelands is purged, yet again, of the dead and the living. With his most recent orders from the Banshee Queen now complete, the Baron elects not to receive new ones, instead becoming a full member of the Thunderlord Militia. And with that, our 6 stories have at last been pared down to 2. Thank God. 5 videos in and we're almost to the end of our 1.0 patch.
Are you serious? All of this is still chapter 1?
Trust me, I'm as exhausted with vanilla as you are. I won't bother hiding the lead here. I'm sure most of you are already aware that the next step is Alterac. But before we get there, I wanted to pause and revisit that question I asked you at the start. What is the purpose of Warcraft's story? What is the purpose of telling this narrative from the point of view of 2 endlessly clashing protagonists? Is it an anti-war message? Even at this early stage, the conflict is beginning to infect the world. Lines are being drawn, and those outside the Horde and the Alliance conflict, like the Night Elves and the Forsaken, are being forced to choose a side. But no, in the end, WoW's cautionary tales all involve corruption. Corruption of power, corruption of duty, corruption of morals, and faction pride is almost exclusively viewed in a heroic light. Shortcuts to power, like those employed by Illidan, Arthas, Gul'dan, or Deathwing, are viewed as inherently negative. We hate these characters for pursuing power, not merely because it corrupts them, but because they sought that power for themselves. Contrastingly, as we continue to struggle against the Alliance or the Horde, the more power gained for the Alliance or Horde, the more we cheer. Not because it will help us destroy the enemy. I like to smash. But because it brings glory to our faction, and thus to our ideals, to our inherent sense of pride, the path we've chosen to walk, and the virtues we choose to embrace. The best of us never cross that line into hatred. We even learn to recognize the strengths of our enemies and to embrace what makes them strong so that we might rise to match it. It's not about learning to put aside our differences, though we're capable of doing so when a greater foe arrives. The moment that threat ends, we resume our fight. It's about a rivalry. It's about challenging each other to be better. It's about strength through opposition and holding each other accountable, holding ourselves accountable. It's not so simple as learning to forget or to forgive or to let go of the past. It's about learning to respect something that stands in direct opposition to you and what you believe in. It's a subtle difference, and one that I feel Blizzard themselves have currently lost sight of. The center of the faction conflict is not meant to be hatred, but rather respect. Respect for oneself to not back down, and respect for the other, and understanding why they can't back down either. Respect for yourself, so that you don't sacrifice what you stand for just to achieve victory, and respect for the opponent, so that you wish to beat them through your own merit, and not to dishonor yourself with cowardice or treachery. The line is fine, and there is a lesson to be learned about how close this conflict walks along the road of hatred. But that's enough about lessons for the time being. We'll have time to discuss again before too long. For now, I think it's time to end the first chunk of our story. And in WoW, when it comes to ending stories, the only proper way to do so comes in the form of a raid. Our story today was about Vanilla's Battlegrounds. The next story will be about Vanilla's raids. With that in mind, what better way to bridge the gap, and with a battleground that stands with one foot in the PvP camp and the other in that of PvE. The Battleground raid, Alterac Valley. As the Ash Knights returned from Sunken Temple and the Thunderslayers returned from Stratholme, they received new missives from SI-7 and the Shattered Hand. The vile Kazakis and the mysterious Nalus have been traced to the icy mountains of Alterac. Their purpose there remains a mystery, but in pursuing them, a new conflict has erupted between the dwarves of the Stormpike Guard and the orcs of the Frostwolf clan. We'll pick up the story from here next time. Boo! Cliffhanger! You suck! I promise there's a method to all the madness. Until then, Hargan, do you want to sign us off?
Ow! Ready to work. Hargan smash. Get back to work on next video. Zug zug.
Okay, I got it. I'll see everyone soon.